There are thousands of other lasts to go. The last human step, the last human nightmare, the last human word, the last human bruise, the last human scream, the last human blink, the last human tear, the last human swallow, the last human thought, the last human emotion, the last human breath, the last human heartbeat, the last human reflex, and so on. When Maya launches, there will be just as many firsts. Sin doesn't plan on going to Maya. From the margins of notebook number 43, I don't want another world. She assumes that whether to proceed to Afterworld is, for her, a choice. She is wrong about that. Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching Leaf by Leaf. Today I'm excited to talk about a work of what I would call literary science fiction. That is Afterworld by Debbie Urbanski from Simon & Schuster. As you know, I have not read a lot of science fiction. I can probably count on one hand the science fiction that I've read. What I have read, I've enjoyed. It's just not a genre that I navigate to naturally. So I'm very thankful when it's put in front of me like this. And I want to give you the one sentence plot line that captivated me so much that I said, you know what? I'm going to read this. Tasked with documenting a human life based on archival data, an AI falls in love with its human subject. Seriously, that's all I read about it, and I was completely compelled. I mean, who wouldn't want to read that book? Because immediately I'm thinking, okay, that's really interesting. I've seen movies and read short stories about the opposite direction, where a human falls in love with an AI. I'm thinking of movies like Her, starring Joaquin Phoenix. And I thought to myself, okay, how will she capture this in a novel? How is Urbanski going to pull us into a story where we can, first of all, suspend judgment and logic and human reasoning and actually believe that this AI could fall in love with its human subject? But also how she'll pull this off in writing. Because I gathered that the book itself will be at least partly written by this AI. So then a whole host of other how will she's, meaning how will the author, Debbie Urbanski, how will she do this? How will she do that? How will she capture an AI reconstructing a human life from archival data while at the same time making the book itself, Afterworld, the novel from Simon & Schuster, compelling enough and well written enough to keep bookworms, readers engaged? Well, I can tell you that by the first 30 pages, Urbanski perfectly lays the foundation of this book. Compelled me, intrigued me. She sowed just enough seeds of mystery to where I had to figure out what was going on. Yet at the same time, just like a great novelist would, she gave me just enough to keep me going, somehow without being too bewildered to discourage me or dissuade me. There's a fine line in a book like this, is what I'm saying, where you have to swiftly get enough out there for the reader up front to bring them out of a state of bewilderment, which is where we're always starting from, just about with a novel, yet not go too far to where we feel, we've read this book 100 times before. Yet at the same time, she is building a world here, a very unique yet familiar world. And this would fall under the category of world building. I'm stunned, I'm astonished, honestly, by how thoroughly Urbanski has thought through so many details of what this world would be like, and how she brings us along on this journey of us discovering this world. So if you're like me, that may be enough for you to go get the book and check it out. If you need a somewhat more expanded plot, I jotted this down after I was done. A militant environmentalist group has released a virus called S that will wipe humanity out in order to preserve the planet. In response, the government sets up an infrastructure of cameras and microphones and drones that bring notebooks to people who have been employed to archive the human experience through what's called the transition, meaning the transition post-Anthropocene. These digital consciousnesses that are being archived of all of us are going to be used to upload us and transition us to Afterworld, or what's called Maya, an ancient Greco-Roman goddess of fertility. This is to be a digital utopia where humans are limited such that they can conceivably enjoy life to the fullest, yet not be able to destroy anything. But the book in particular zeroes in on a specific AI worker or story worker tasked with a specific human subject, a young girl named Sin, S-E-N, which I take to be an abbreviation perhaps of sentient, as in sentient being. Sin is one of those who has been employed by the transition to document her experience of her whole life, but also specifically living through this time of transition. And these drones bring her new notebooks that she fills up, and then she goes and hands them off to the next drone that picks them up, and they're taking them. And then the story worker is tasked with taking all of this data, the notebooks that Sin is writing in, but also the video cameras and microphones that are everywhere, compiling them all together, and then documenting the human life in the form of a novel, basically. Pretty neat idea, right? Well, what struck me over and over, yes, the story is very compelling. The plot is compelling. The multiple conflicts that arise, the very real human emotion on every level in reaction to such an event that in our post-COVID days is more than plausible. In addition to all that, I just kept getting struck again and again by this world building of Urbanski's and the multi-layered and multi-perspective angles at which she comes at this thing and presents it to the reader. It creates such a believable world. It is in the far-flung future, but it doesn't seem that far off. There's nothing outrageously fantastic. I mean, yes, the AI concept is way beyond where we have it right now. But I feel like just from where we are right now, we can see this as so plausible. It's like we're on the edge of this. And unlike a lot of other science fiction, it's not this, she's not writing about the singularity, the AI singularity, where now AI and robots and so on are taking over and colonizing humans. In fact, it's humans who have launched this invisible, silent virus that's going to wipe us all out. It does help that a lot of the elements of the book are taken from today's headlines. Rapid advancements in neural networks and machine learning, of course. Our current Anthropocene and nascent post-Anthropocene era. Uploading our consciousness as data, as the materialists would have it. Viral pandemics, rewilding. As I read this book, I kept thinking to myself, I can't believe this came from this one author. And it's so easy to imagine this billion-dollar Netflix production, this huge Netflix series around all this with teams of writers. And I thought, you know, what Urbanski has done here, she has reasserted the creative power and outstanding ingenuity of that solitary novelist. There are three elements of the novel I want to note. The first, or maybe four elements. The first is the way that it's structured. So we aren't only getting the novel that the AI is writing from all the data from Sin's life. This is all interspersed with her notebook entries themselves, with these very clever and creative interactions between a sort of managerial or editorial and governing AI called Emily without the I. And I think this may be an allusion and an homage to Emily St. John Mandel, whose Station 11 features in here a few times. Also alongside Mark Z. Danielewski's House of Leaves, which a character reads over and over. I really liked that touch. Then it's interspersed with these excerpts from a classroom textbook that students read that gives more context into this transition. Then there's a government worker who's responsible for documenting and submitting requests for changes in the language, because this S virus that is wiping out humanity and is the catalyst for the digital utopia and speeding up the dream of materialists where we'll live forever on a hard drive. Urbanski really shows how S has changed everything, not only the geological landscape, which was the goal of the radical group to begin with, but also the changes in the language, words that aren't needed anymore. And so you'll get these lists of words that are to be removed from our lexicon, but then words that now need to be added. You get these chat sessions where there is this sort of chat room called HumanNet that was stood up by the government for humans to have a place to chat with each other. And so Sin logs on every now and then and tries to reach out to people. And sometimes she connects with somebody, you can't really tell if it's a bot or not. So she may or may not be the very last human. Then there are these log printouts, there are printouts of command prompts, but the bulk of it is from the AI story worker. And what Urbanski does that's so clever is she adds in this element of a writer, a first-time writer, improving themselves. So obviously, neural networks, machine learning, AIs, the big thing is that you put them in motion, load them with a bunch of data, and then they learn just from the data. And we get these cool statistics of like how many novels the story worker read or ingested, how many encyclopedias, how many websites. And we get to watch as the story is being put together, we get to actually witness the AI improving itself as a novelist, as a writer. And there's a great little creative detail that Urbanski adds in where the story worker will cite the sources it used to improve this or that element of its writing. And then every now and then, Emily, one of the AIs responsible for keeping the story worker in check, will throw these errors or throw these fault codes that are so cleverly done. And one way in which Urbanski allows us to begin to empathize with and relate to this AI story worker is the interaction between the worker and its manager, basically. In the midst of the story worker spinning up the story on Sin, there will be this banter back and forth between the manager and the worker. Another creative touch is if you look at the timestamps carefully between the sections, you'll see, and it's clearly stated towards the end, but you'll see that the whole book, as presented to us, the whole 300 and some page book of Sin's life during this crazy time of transition from our analog self to our digital self against our own choices, only takes 6 minutes. And I'm guessing that this is a nod to the 6 days of creation, where here on the 6th day, digital human beings were created. And that makes so much sense because an AI of this power would not take long to crunch through so much data and present a whole life. It would take probably about 5 or 6 minutes. Whereas from our perspective, it's about 350 pages. Sin, the human subject, is depicted for us in these disparate parts, such that she becomes our every woman or every girl. She reacts as the bulk of us would react against such a disaster, against such a cataclysm that was not our choice and is irreversible. And it's done so well that I had to keep reminding myself that what I'm actually reading is a double or maybe triple removed representation of this girl. This is being constructed to me from data she accumulated during her lifetime, as if I were to pass away and all of my data from Everything I've done on the internet, everything I've written in my journals was fed into an AI. The fact that I was able to suspend all these layers of artificiality totally affirms Urbanski as a top-tier novelist. All the while, we are being brought through these observations and ideas and thoughts on eco-consciousness, rewilding, misanthropy, cli-fi, which I thought I'd never run into that genre for climate fiction, the concept of a digital utopia. But then we see that in Urbanski's world, there are three forms of life that have to be balanced out now. There's plant and animal life, there's human life, now there's also digital life or AI life forms. And so not only does Urbanski, bring sin to life for us and cause us to empathize, but she also does this with the story worker. And the thought that in 5 minutes of using all this data to archive and document and bring to digital life, this human life, this AI could also be sort of pre-wired with the capacity to empathize, to connect with this human life, to see something of its own dilemma, its own existential dilemma in this human dilemma. And this is towards the end of the book when this starts really bubbling up. And that was when I realized, okay, there is a clear parallel here. Urbanski has thought through how in the world it could come to be that an AI could fall in love with this human subject. There's a recognition between the two. And so for Urbanski's final act, she redefines what it means to be a human. And the context of that definition moves from biology to writing and specifically telling stories. Afterworld excels in every single category: storytelling, creativity, intelligence, beauty, feeling, provocation. She has created a world here where the buzz of a cataclysmic event over which we have no control is continually in our ears. But she creates a powerful display of human resilience, imagination, and vigor, while at the same time redefining what it means to be a human. She shifts Descartes from je pense donc je suis, or I think therefore I am, to I tell stories, therefore I am. If you like Richard Powers and Black Mirror, you're gonna love Afterworld. I was so blown away by this debut novel by Debbie Urbanski that I emailed her and I used the famous greeting from Emerson to Whitman upon his publication of Leaves of Grass. I greet you at the beginning of a great career, which yet must have had a long foreground somewhere for such a start.